Hello everyone, welcome back to another book review, and in this book review I'm going to be reviewing a book I finished recently as in last night, and that is Teardown, Memoir of a Vanishing City by Gordon Young. Now this book details the memoir of a man who grew up in Flint, Michigan and has moved to San Francisco and is now looking to come back to Flint, Michigan, at least to visit, possibly to buy a house. He has this attraction to his hometown. Now for those of you who maybe don't live in the United States, or even if you do live in the United States and aren't familiar with Flint, Michigan, it is known for poverty and crime, among a lot of other things. It's not necessarily a pleasant city to live in, although, as mentioned in this book, there are actually many pleasant aspects of the city. There's a lot of nice people. It's just, as an overall characteristic, is known for both poverty and crime. So Gordon Young has lived in San Francisco for 15 years, and he is now he actually recently has purchased a house with his girlfriend, I believe, in San Francisco. And he goes through the process of trying to get a mortgage in San Francisco, which all I can say as someone who does not live in a place where the housing is as expensive as San Francisco, and also someone who's never bought their own house, I'm currently renting, that just seemed miserable. I don't know why anyone would get a mortgage that was that miserable, but that's a whole different process. But going through that process, he's kind of developed an attraction to his hometown, and he's been talking with these, I'm assuming they're drinking buddies. I believe he also plays basketball with them. Well, maybe going back to Flint, Michigan and buying a really cheap house. So he decides to make good on this idea, and he goes back to Flint, Michigan. And the whole memoir is basically him traveling multiple times from California back to Michigan to see Flint, see what's become of it. He kind of touches on some of the history, both the actual history of Flint, Michigan, as well as his family's personal history. He goes back and looks at a lot of houses that he remembers from his youth. He goes and looks at places that he's familiar with. And he also talks about some of the experiences that he experienced growing up in Flint, Michigan that, for him, were just normal. Like, there was a man who was trying to break into his house when his mother was home. Another time he thought his brother was joking around downstairs making noise. He goes downstairs, it's actually a burglar. He relates another time where there was this stretch of road where people would shoot at cars at night, so the whole family would just slouch down in their cars as they went past this area. And for him, there was a level of normal life in that. And as he relates some of these stories to his girlfriend, who he's currently living with in San Francisco, he realizes, wow, actually that wasn't very normal, and this would be the cause of therapy for other people. So this book just is a look at his life in Flint, Michigan from the eyes of a modern, or a look at him growing up in Flint, Michigan from his perspective as someone who has not lived in Flint, Michigan for a while. He also takes a lot of time through this book to talk with people who are trying to improve the community. There's a pastor, there are some homeowners, he goes through at least two couples who are renovating homes, or who have a home and are staying in it and actively making the place a better place. He talks to some politicians. Now this book, I believe, was 2010, 2013, so I don't think the politicians will be current anymore. They've probably moved over. 2013 is when this was published, so the politics might not be entirely current, but it was current in the time this book was written. And yeah, there's a lot of challenges in the city, and you can really feel the author's emotional connection to the city, and it's nice. It's nice, it's interesting, it's also sad. I think it's one thing to maybe look at pictures or visit and be like, wow, this place has really seen better days, but to hear someone's emotional connection with an area that is continuing to not fare well is really powerful. So I really enjoyed this book. The purpose of this man's travels to Flint is the possibility of buying homes. So this whole book kind of has this overarching theme of whether or not he should purchase a home in Flint, or whether or not he's going to stay in San Francisco, which I believe the idea is always that he's going to stay in San Francisco. Maybe he gets a second house in Flint. So that's what this whole story, overarching story, kind of is, sprinkled with actual history of Flint and his personal history with Flint and interesting memories from the area. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 stars. It kind of teetered between a 3-star and a 4-star, just because, well, I don't know. I think I wound up giving it a 4-star because there's definitely some stories in here that I'm going to remember, some very interesting stories, and I'm a sucker for a positive book. I love books that talk about the good things that are happening in this world. And so there were a lot of positive stories in this book, but the book also didn't gloss over the struggles that living in the city can bring, such as houses being stripped of all their plumbing and wiring, or places being broken into, or the amount of poverty or incarceration, problems with just how much crime is happening, closing schools down. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot to discuss, but there's overall, I think, an optimistic tone in the book, which I really appreciated, because I think if no one believes there's hope for a place, then that's it. There's no hope for the place. It really boils down to what you believe. If the place is capable of turning around, then it's capable of turning around. If no one believes the place can turn around, then if no one believes the place can turn around, then the place isn't going to turn around. So it was nice to see a level of optimism. I'm not going to reveal his final decision in the end about the house, about moving, but overall I was fascinated by the book. It read very, very quickly, I will say, and there were some interesting photos he included in the middle of the book. And this just made me more interested about the area, about Flint, Michigan in general. Obviously, it's been in the news for a variety of bad things, at least here in the United States, but I think there's a lot of good happening in the community too, and I should also add as a disclaimer, I was not born in Flint, Michigan. I was not raised in Flint, Michigan. I have visited Flint, Michigan many times. So I am not completely unfamiliar with the area, but I don't think I have a qualified opinion that I can provide on the area. But I do want to become a little more well-versed in this area. So I haven't read these yet, but I got 2 books. One on Flint, 1890 to 1960, and another one which isn't Flint specific, but it is about the entire county that Flint resides in Michigan. So I'm hoping to read these 2 over the weekend, and these aren't really books, maybe they're more of just like landmarks with little blurbs, but yeah, I think what would be really interesting is, I kind of like books like this where they just have a lot of old pictures, because it's really fun to take these, and you can get this for, I assume, anywhere in the United States. You can find a book similar to this. This was put by the Genesee County Historical Society, so obviously if you don't live in this very specific county, you're not going to be able to get it, but I assume almost every place, at least in the United States, and I would venture to say most places in the world, have a historical society or group that would put together books like these, showing old pictures. And what I think is really interesting to do is to actually go and take a little road trip to an area with a book like this after reading it, and go see what the place looks like now, go see what these landmarks look like now. I just think that's really fun, so I'm excited to go through both of these books as a compliment to the Teardown book that I just finished, and maybe I'll take a little road trip to see what these places are like. But yes, very interesting. I would recommend, I do not know if this is the best book on Flint, and I should say, do not go into this expecting to get a full, like, detailed history of Flint, because it's a memoir of one individual's personal experience growing up in Flint and now returning as an adult, possibly looking to buy a house. It's a very specific topic within Flint, the huge thing that is Flint. So yeah, I would say don't go into this expecting a detailed breakdown of the history dating back to its geological formations to present day. That would take a lot longer than this, and that's not the purpose of this book. So if you're looking for a general history of Flint, I would say do not go with this. But if you're interested in just the memoir of a man returning to his hometown, even if you have no interest in the personal interest in the city itself, I would say give this one a read. It was interesting, it was good, and kept me entertained for a couple nights. So that's all I have today. I will let you know when I finish these and my thoughts on them. And if anyone else has read this book and has thoughts on it, please let me know. I'd be interested in hearing from anyone else who has visited the area or who has lived in the area what their thoughts on the book are, because that would intrigue me greatly. So yeah, let me know if you read the book, if you visited the area, if you have any other recommendations, and I am happy to hear it. Have a great day, everybody.